This is Dave Moss of the Unfunded List, and I'm pleased to bring you the Open Door Philanthropy podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Today, I've been invited to a hip Boston co-working space to visit with my good friend Victor Bogachev. I first met Victor at the White House at an invitation-only event. At the time, Victor was a student at George Washington University. He was educated in the U.S., but comes from Russia, where his father founded one of the world's largest liquid natural gas companies, and was later forced to sell to the state for a fraction of what it was worth. But it was worth $35 billion, so a fraction of that is still a great deal. I remember during our first meeting that Victor was disappointed by the lack of philanthropy in Russia. I also remember that he was very optimistic about the future and hoped to empower and encourage future generations of Russian philanthropists. I've kept up with him over the years, and we see each other at various philanthropy-related conferences and events. Most notably, we're both fixtures at the Nexus Global and Nexus US summits. Victor and I get along very well. We've drank vodka together on multiple occasions, and we even drank a little bit during this interview. I always enjoy speaking with him. Of the super wealthy young folks I know, and I know quite a few, I find Victor to be one of the more grounded, passionate, intriguing, and interesting of the bunch. While I do see him often, I've never really had the opportunity to sit down and have a proper chat with him. I'm particularly interested to hear his thoughts on international politics, philanthropy inside Russia, and his experiences as the son of a well-known Russian oligarch. Enjoy! Thank you, Victor, for having me here in your office. This is a pretty cool place. Let's dive right into it, because I know you are a very busy man. Well, let's start at the beginning. What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Moscow, Russia.
I've heard of it.
It's a nice place. But I grew up. I was born right at the turnover of the Soviet Union in 1990.
1990, you were born.
1990. I am a twin. I have a twin sister.
Really?
Yeah, very smart, much smarter, better looking, and more charismatic than I am. But we'll leave that for. But I was born. When we were born, both my parents left the government jobs during the turnover. My dad went into business for himself, into oil and gas business specifically. He grew up in the United States because my grandfather was the press secretary for the Soviet Union in
Your grandfather?
Yes.
What was his name?
Vladimir. Of
course it was.
He actually had an affair with Georgia O'Keeffe, believe it or not.
Good for him.
I found that out through reading one of her biographies,
Really?
surprisingly enough, yeah. But my dad...
You were randomly reading a Georgia O'Keeffe biography, and it was like, and then I slept with Vladimir.
Actually, so it was... I was reading... it was after my grandfather passed away, because I knew a lot of his stories. But after he passed away, I was just kind of... people wrote obituaries. It was in the AP press, like everything. And one of the articles that I stumbled upon was like an excerpt from a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe, and that he was kind of prominently featured in as, all of the artists were hanging out with a cool Soviet journalist.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting and very surprising to find. But my dad.
So you go back. Your dad grew up in America.
Yeah, my dad was in America from age 8 to 15, and then he had to go back to Russia because that's when it was kind of compulsory for diplomats' children to go back and finish their education in the Soviet Union. Mm. But he grew up essentially believing that American education is the best, partly because it doesn't really hold, the whole point is a very objective, teaching students, kids to think for themselves, to have like a free mind. And even though the Soviet Union ended, my dad was very worried about like the endocrinology that will be coming from administrations and whatever may arise, that he wanted us to give us an opportunity to get the American education. So since I was 12, my sister and I have been in boarding schools, then college.
Where did you go to boarding school?
I went to Fay School, then I went to St. George's in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Then after...
I've been to beach number 3, or whatever.
Well, we're right on beach number 2.
Yeah. I've been by the campus, I guess.
Yeah. It used to be actually part of St. George's campus, and then they gave it to the government during World War II, because Newport used to have one of the top naval bases in America, and they gave it to defend, and obviously federal government can't really just give back property, so they donated it to the city.
That's a very good school.
Yeah, no, it was great. Unfortunately, my senior year had to leave for buying some friends alcohol, and then I went to a gunnery in Litchfield or in Washington, Connecticut, which was awesome, and then GW after that, which was an amazing experience.
Sure, yes. I believe when we met, you were at GW.
I was, 2011.
Talk to me a little bit about, you said you were here since 12.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit about before you were 12.
Before I was 12, it was a crazy time in Russia. This was when essentially you go from...
This was in the 90s.
The 90s, yeah. So it was a wild time. It was a dangerous time. There was, people being shot, constant fighting over the territory, over business. My dad was very good at what he did, and, but you still fall to certain, vices. I mean, it was essentially you go from, 0 to 100. In a span of couple of years. There was extreme levels of poverty. There was extreme levels of wealth. There was a lot of distrust to the new regime, but not wanting to go back to the old. I was sheltered in part from, the realities of the change that came to Russia, but at the same time, you could see it everywhere.
You were aware of it, even when you were in single digits?
I would say yes. I've always been interested in politics. I was always interested in economics of change, so it was kind of like...
Always a little toddler Victor.
Even as a little toddler Victor, yeah, I know. Actually, there's a story about how I fell ill, and I have a fever, so my mom calls in a doctor. In Russia, doctors arrive home. You don't have to go to the hospital. And I'm lying, and the doctor examines me, and then he, tells me the condition, and he's like... All right, well, Victor, do you have any questions for me? And apparently, in my feverish state, I was like, yes. What is the current dollar exchange rate? So, but, I always just had a dream for Russia where it's a civilized, Western country with, because the people have suffered for so long, where you're at least given the basic rights and especially, the opportunity to move up to succeed, where it's not this hierarchical structure where essentially, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer.
Did you have any sort of religious education in Russia?
I did. I grew up Russian Orthodox, since abandoned. Sorry, Mom, if you hear this. Unfortunately, so Russia used to be obviously... atheistic.
That's right.
But at the turn of the century, my dad and my mom both became religious. One of our good friends, he's Archbishop of Antioch Orthodox Church. He's officially an ambassador to Russia on behalf of the Antioch Orthodox Church. So, I grew up going to church and everything, but then recently, since Kirill was elected Patriarch of Russian Orthodox Church, and they've essentially been crowning Putin as the next emperor, and there's so much corruption where it's, it's the exact, polar opposite of what Pope Francis is doing. I was just like, well, I can't really, align myself with that, because...
Fair enough. But that's the church.
Yeah.
Right? And churches can certainly be corrupt. With your, was there any part of your religious upgrading that encouraged? I mean, you're now a very generous person and interested in giving back and improving the world, what we Jews would call tikkun olam. Would you say that any of that came from your, even though you've since abandoned it, but...
In part, but I think it was more just my mom and dad and the education they provided me that, nothing comes easy in life. It takes... My mom was always very involved in trying to, help the orphanages in Russia or underprivileged children, especially the ones dealing with, illnesses and stuff. That kind of always just made me aware, having to give up half of your toys every year to make sure that it goes to children who,
So you were giving up half of... She made you give up your toys?
Oh, yeah. She would go every summer.
How did you feel about that?
Well, I knew... The only thing she couldn't touch was my stuffed toys that I slept with.
Yeah.
But other than that,
I still have my same teddy bear, Felix.
Oh, I used to align. I had a hierarchy of my favorite stuffed toys. I had my Pandy and I had my Goosey, and then everybody else. It was like when I fell asleep, it was like two of them on left and right, and then it was based on like a hierarchy of who was the favorite to least favorite, and I slept with all of that.
Terrific, yeah. But so you were. Your next question here was like, do you remember your first gift? Would that be you giving toys to kids?
That was definitely it. Every single time, and my mom was very good. She never made us give it up, but she would always show how pictures of her at the orphanage, how happy the kids were, and so we kind of wanted to give.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents also giving money to these orphanages?
Yeah, so my mom, she essentially did fundraisers for them, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little later, there is no established system for philanthropy in Russia.
Yeah, well,
in fact, most of the funds that were started in the 90s were all essentially money laundering funds. Most people...
No, your mother was not laundering money.
No. She was just giving straight up to the orphanages. She would visit, she would talk to them. But even that was still hard, because even as you're trying to collect, money for them, or to give them money for, better conditions for the kids, you never know, the head of the orphanage might go ahead and buy themselves a new car, or they you never know exactly where it's going. So it's, instead of giving money, a lot of times it's better to okay, what is your need? I will buy that for you guys. And my parents also gave money to the church a lot, actually. The Church of Christ the Savior in Moscow, our big cathedral, the central square, has our name for giving whatever amount it was. But
how aware were you of that when you were very young?
I wouldn't say I was extremely aware. I wouldn't say I even knew that it was something extraordinary or something that was being done. It was kind of
same, yeah. So my grandmother was a big fundraiser, and I even saw her at ceremonies with her big check and getting bricks and stuff. And I remember the first time I found out, a friend of mine, that his grandmother was not a philanthropist. It was very strange to me, because I assumed everybody's grandmother was. Because by then you made money, and now you give it away. It's just what happens to everybody. Well,
see, and that's a really big problem in Russia. Is a lot of people made money not very ethically.
You don't say.
and when that happens,
it happens here as well.
Yeah, but you try to cling on to it, because when you didn't work hard for your money, you realize that it can just as easily be taken away. And those people, that's why they spend lavishly. They're not worried about here I'm giving because I earned and I know what it's like to be in tough conditions. They're more okay, well, let me spend it before somebody comes in to take it away. And it's tough. That's why, philanthropy in Russia right now is kind of dead. And regular people are actually the ones who are doing the most right now. For example, one of the few bright spots in Russia right now is this thing called the Heart Foundation. And it does through TV advertisement. It has specific for, a kid, a man who can't afford some treatment, and people can just text the amount that they want to send, and it just goes off of their phone bill. And that's been actually probably one of the most successful philanthropic drives in Russia. And that's because people can see directly who it is going for. They see when it's almost like one of those telephone
It's so important. We're going to take a quick vodka break now. So, I'm trying to think of where we met. Nexus, right? The first Nexus. Have you been to every Nexus event in the US?
I've missed, I think, 2013 and maybe 2014 global. But other than that, I think I have been to.
So, but in the beginning, you were so we would have probably met at the first Nexus, right?
Yep.
Or were you at the White House Summit on Next Gen Leadership with Howie Buffett?
Yes, I think so.
All right, right on. Were you there as well, Alex? No, we have Alex Simon today running the recorder for us. I told him not to say anything. If you want to say something, Alex, now you say hello.
It's nice to be here, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that, Alex. One of the things we have in common is that we've been in Nexus for a while, and every now and then someone likes to write an article about all the rich kids in Nexus, and usually the first paragraph will highlight one of the attendees, and we have both been that person highlighted. You outdid me a little bit because yours was in Vanity Fair. Mine I was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which is nice. Behind the paywall though, so not that many people got to see it. But what I'm going to do right now, I hope it's not too embarrassing for you, is I'm going to read the paragraph from Vanity Fair that's about you, and then we can talk about some of those bits. This is similar. This is one of the things that comes up about you first if one Googles your name. Viktor Bogachev is another attendee of the summit whose progressive values challenge the constrictions of established power. He is the son of the Russian oligarch Nikolay Bogachev, who, after securing a fortune in the energy industry, was famously forced by Russian officials to sell his business for a fraction of its value to Gazprom. Is that?
Yep.
Gazprom, a company owned primarily by the state. The controversy was a highlight in the ongoing battle for power between billionaire oligarchs and Russian government officials. But Viktor Bogachev seems relatively unfettered by the dispute. I want to one day see a democracy in Russia, he told me. I don't know if that will happen, but it's definitely something to strive for. Victor hopes to encourage newly rich entrepreneurs in Moscow and St. Petersburg to donate more of their wealth to charitable causes. In Russia, we have zero philanthropy, he says. There's a sense among elites that at any moment instability might cause all the wealth to disappear, he explained. And some charities have been misused in the past as fronts for illegally laundered money. One of Victor's goals is to apply the format used for the conference, they're talking about the Nexus Summit, at the conference at the UN, to similar events in Russia, as difficult as that could prove initially. So this was, I don't know if you remember, 2010 or like...
Yeah, I think it was 2011. I think it was after the first summit.
So it's interesting I'd like to check in. One of your goals was to apply that format used for the conference to similar events in Russia. And how is the progress on that front?
So that has actually been a very difficult thing to organize. We tried working with Jonah and a couple of other Russian attendees, which there are not many at Nexus.
I don't believe I've met any. You might be the only Russian I've met.
I met a couple, but they're expats who live abroad. Well, I guess I could technically consider myself working on my green card.
Where are you right now?
Working on my green card. No, but part of it, what has made it specifically difficult is a couple of years ago, Russia instituted another anti-Western law, which actually forced any organization that receives, has board chairs or anything else like that, any foreign money, it designates them as a foreign agent. So in fact, you have to say, so if it was Nexus, it would be foreign agent Nexus organization in Russia. Mm-hmm. If you receive, even and that extends to philanthropic organizations as well, you can't go and fundraise money for a hospital in Russia abroad because then you have to be labeled as a foreign agent.
Emergency room?
Yeah, and it's almost like a...
foreign agent veterinary hospital.
It makes you sound like a spy organization.
It does sound very nefarious, and all it means is that you're from another country.
Yeah, I mean, they were honestly trying to target a lot of nonprofits that were working specifically to build democracy, even the famous Levada Center, places that receive funding from maybe private individuals, might be government sponsored organizations from abroad trying to establish a presence in Russia, and that was their goal, is essentially to be oh well. Mm-hmm. They're not here for you. They're representing foreign interests.
And to be fair, there are definitely a number of American well-meaning nonprofits that are trying to influence Russia.
Of course, but that's everywhere. I mean, there's a ton of American nonprofits trying to influence America.
There's yeah.
It's usually driven by people who
trying to influence whatever.
Yeah, but it made it extremely, extremely difficult. And right now there's a couple organizations in Russia that receive financial support from the elites, and most of them concerned changing the government. Alexei Navalny, who is the head of Foundation Against Corruption in Russia. He's the prominent opposition. He was the first one who started looking into the finances of every state corporation and being where the hell is this money going? What is happening here? He's been in jail multiple times.
Ask how many times has this guy been arrested?
He's actually currently running for president against Putin. They're saying that even if he gets 15% of the vote, that would be a victory for everybody in Russia. Mm-hmm.
15%.
15%, yeah. But most people, when they try to give, they give to this right now. They will give to funds that defend, that allow for lawyers to defend anybody who's arrested at meetings or protests. Navalny's anti-corruption fund. Some campaigns, but in limited sense. Everybody just say there's a very little culture and awareness of what you can give to and where you won't get flagged at to really try to encourage that movement, and that's with people who have not left Russia to go abroad, because
in order for this to happen, they need to be Russian nationals contributing to a Russian entity. It really can't be in
no.
Is there any so I know, so for instance, India has a lot of regulation about that.
Yeah.
It takes a very long time to set it up. But there are a number of entities that can allow that. Are there anything inside? There's no way for me to contribute to what is it called? Heart Foundation.
Heart Foundation.
Or Foundation for Corruption.
Well, actually, so the Foundation Against Corruption does have several American donors, and it's part of the ones that they wanted to label as foreign agent, to be this is. I think they have tried to limit their contributions from abroad to, because of the moniker and extra investigations from, the Russian version of IRS and whatever it is. But normally you can't just go and be I want to write a check to this organization. Mm-hmm. You can't be even if you're trying to say build a hospital in Russia. Even if you were living in Russia and you're an expat living in Russia, unless you have a citizenship and you donate X amount of money, technically you're designated as a foreigner giving money, thus trying to influence Russia with foreign views and whatever it is.
Yeah, my Western nonsense.
Yeah, the Western.
Are there 501c3s or any of that sort of structure around giving there?
There are. I mean,
you get a tax deduction?
No, you don't get. There was a program for tax deductions that lasted. Actually, like I said, I just spoke with Dad on the phone about it. It lasted for 2 years, but it was ineffective because most people were either trying to take advantage of the program, or they were so mistrustful of the organizations that they could donate to that the regular people just didn't do it. Period.
Mm-hmm. So is there enough wealth in Russia for these things to be successful? Can they raise enough money from inside Russia? You're talking about 15% of the vote being the big hairy audacious goal, which I hope it happens, but it will mean that he doesn't become president, correct?
Oh no, yeah, but I think it will cause enough to make people believe that it is possible.
And then maybe more would donate in the future?
Yeah, and it's also just more people being outspoken about their views. We still have that old Stalinistic mentality where, they used to call them kitchen dialogues, right? Because the only place where you could speak freely was usually at night in the kitchen with a radio playing on loud, so whether there's bugs or anybody around you, you can't hear. People used to tell on each other. They used to... there's this building on... in Russia on the river, which used to be apartments for, high up politicians or politicians from the regions who are coming into Moscow. And during the worst of Stalinistic purges, literally people would go in the morning and ask the doorman who was taken last night. And that's because you could be the portrait of Stalin is not hanging quite straight in their apartment, and they would get taken in for questioning during that time.
Really? For a crooked Stalin picture?
Yeah. Huh. And then people made it up. They would go and they're I'm competing for a promotion with this guy.
His Stalin picture's crooked.
Yeah, or you would say I heard him talking something, and the thing is they would take them in. It was kind of V for Vendetta type, which is what it is also returning to in a way. But they would take them in and they would torture them enough until they get a confession. And it didn't matter, he might have been a loyalist. Most of those, especially in that building, were all party loyalists, all trying to move up. It was just them.
You torture them enough and they can...
Yeah, of course.
Not that I have been tortured, but this is what I understand. Amazing. So, you ended up at GW.
Yep.
Because you were interested in politics and international government stuff.
Yep.
That's the right place to be. Did you like it there?
Oh, I loved it. It was
Seems nice.
amazing 4 years of my life.
Yeah.
Made some fantastic friends who I consider family, to this day.
Still in touch with them?
Yep.
Some of them live up here in Boston? You hang out with you guys?
Only a couple of them live in Boston. Most of them are either in New York or still in DC.
Right on. If I remember correct, you were involved with the college Republicans.
Yep.
I think one of the first things you told me was that you were very interested in conservative politics. It's one of the first things I remember you telling me. Are you still a Republican?
Well, as you know, right now, I think the term Republican
is different than when I will admit that it is a very different term now.
Yeah.
Than when you told me that.
So, for me, it is the reason why I loved the Republican ideology, and that's the reason why I love America. And despite all the hardships with immigration, I want to stay here and continue to also be impactful in this country. Is that to me, what being a Republican was, you believe in life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Obviously, I think a part of fiscal economics was more appealing to me over democratic. First, I used to be a little more socially conservative. That has changed a lot, since 2011 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I would probably be would consider myself more of a libertarian, except I do see a need for a central government and, in certain affairs. And also I'm a globalist. I don't believe in borders. I think
You're admitting you're a globalist. Good for you.
Well, that was another thing. I hate that it has now become almost a bad term.
It's a bad word.
They're like, it's the elites who are planning against us, which is.
Well, I don't want to harp on politics too much, but recently someone said to me, as bad as Trump is, we avoided a real globalist nightmare in Hillary Clinton. I'm like, what is wrong with you, sir? Enough. I think I don't think Democrats have all the answer, and I think anybody can take a cursory glance at my Facebook wall, and you'd think I'm like the Johnny Democrat, right? But that's really just because of what's currently happening.
Of course.
The first person I ever voted for was Olympia Snowe, my senator from Maine, Republican senator, who has left the Republican Party because...
her and King are both independent now, right?
I think he's been independent the whole time. He was my governor when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And he's just been awesome the last couple of weeks. And he was always awesome. In between the two hearings where he kicked butt, he went up to Maine to go to this little island called Islesboro, because there was a high school graduation. 7 kids graduated, and he went up there to be the commencement speaker. And that was in between, 2 of the most important intelligence hearings ever. But you know what? It's important that those 7 kids are graduating from high school, too.
And that they also know that this is...
And their senator cares about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I just...
where you feel included and not just this is some distant person who goes to...
And I've been to Islesboro. It's not easy to get out there. It's a long ferry ride, and it's a long ride out to get to the dock. Beautiful, though, once you're there, it's incredible.
As is much of Maine.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are parts that are not beautiful. If you're looking for the ugly part of Maine, I suggest Rumford. If you've never been to Rumford, it is horrible, and there's a wood pulp plant there that is the worst smell of all time.
It's not like the nice mulch pine trees.
No, God, it's awful. I can smell it now. It's really funny. The smell and memory is very uniquely tied. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges for Republicans is to get back to the stuff that you were interested in that made you involved in the college Republicans, and the stuff that made me vote for Olympia. I mean, she was a very good senator for us, and she had principles and integrity, and it's a thing that used to exist with them. And I hope they get back there. I think these people are, for the most part, probably fundamentally decent. Just
they have to put on the show for
took some wrong turns and listen to some wrong consultants. I'm not even really sure at this point. That a lot of
the media has become so polarizing as well. It seems like the more face time they get, the more they try to essentially stick to the fundamentalist rhetoric on both sides.
Yeah,
and it's kind of okay, well, where's the middle? The whole point of you guys is coming to compromises. That's what this nation is founded on.
Yeah, certainly. Are you able to? I'm not even sure what the laws are. Can you contribute to political causes?
I can volunteer my time. I can, obviously attend fundraisers, but it has to be at somebody else's, expense. I technically can't donate anything to federal or local campaigns, I believe.
Interesting.
I can host fundraisers as long as...
Have you?
Well, I was going to in 2016 for Jeb, but that didn't pan out.
Didn't seem like... I don't think more money is what he needed.
No.
I wish that had gone better.
Me too.
So I was looking up, some other Bogachev stuff, and I found something. I couldn't find a lot more information on it. The Young Energy Prize.
Young Energy Prize. That was my dad's firm that was out of Luxembourg, which mostly that was after the ordeal with Gazprom.
Chronologically, it seemed like it was right afterwards.
Yeah, so he founded his own investment firm because he didn't want to have to rely on investors for his company dealings. It was like his own private equity fund.
Mm-hmm. Was it a prize, or is that just part of the name?
No, that was just part of the name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's
I kind of like the idea. I was imagining this, like, for young people interested in energy, there's like a prize for. That's not what it is at all.
No.
That would be cool if that existed.
That would be cool.
But he was investing in energy.
In energy, yeah.
In possibly young people, or like younger, something young about it.
So the part of it why it was Young Energy was because he was trying to specifically invest in regions that were not like covered, by traditional like energy investments. So a lot of his was looking at West Africa, like offshores there. For him, when he looks, so when he looks at the way that modern like IOCs, the international oil corporations operate, what they usually do, despite building like a compound here and there, and then like maybe giving the proceeds to the country, they usually just kind of like check it out, hire all of their own guys from abroad, and then leave. And for him, the whole point is, well, if you're establishing a company there, you should be saying, okay, instead of giving you this money from like the oil wealth, we go and we send like this many people to school to become engineers or to become like manager technicians for the plant, to hire like everybody essentially to be native to where they work, where the oil is derived from. And instead of just being like, oh, here's 10 million to this guy, here's 10 million to this guy, they buy themselves yachts, cars, and send their wives on shopping sprees in Paris.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that would have much impact.
No.
So there's no more Young Energy Prize?
No, right now he was just liquidated some of his assets, so he's trying to determine, what's next, what's the future to go into. Not a lot of opportunities in Russia, and just politically very dreadful.
Yes. But you mentioned that this was in Luxembourg?
This was in Luxembourg, yeah.
So there was you must have assets outside of Russia.
So it was, yeah, and part of it was because of after dealing with Gazprom, essentially, after there was like raids on his office with like guns trying to like find information, he had 3 cars following him at all time. When I was young and I was in boarding school, I remember the news that I could get was only from like online news, like what is going on with like their trial, their fight, because he couldn't speak on the phone, he couldn't speak on the via the email.
You would have been at, where were you, St. George's then? Or?
This was Faye through St. George's, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then I remember like even when we were with him, we were in his office and he would turn up the TV noise loud and like tell us in whispers like what is the development, what is going on, because they had everything bugged. The kitchen dialogues, yeah.
Kitchen dialogues.
It was kind of very similar. Like they tried to bribe his driver, always were following him. Like, I mean, it was intense, and it was good fortunately because of his connections from the past. Like, they didn't go after him in a way that like would have been life threatening. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you can imagine, like for us, it was scary because it's
very harrowing. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that was part of also the reason why he was glad that we're in the States where, they can't use us to try to like force his hand or something like that.
Yeah, I'm also glad about that. I'm very glad. So overall, though, he's fine now. He came out relatively unscathed from the thing.
Yeah, I mean, aside from like you read in that column, like he was forced to sell it at fraction of what it is right now. The company that he founded, which is essentially now like Putin's personal piggy bank, is worth I think like $32 billion. It was the first LNG. It was actually he was working with the U.S. government because he was trying to actually. It was the first LNG built in Russia that he was building, and it was going to be going directly to the United States. Liquid natural gas station. Oh. So it's in Russia. There's a lot of laws on who can sell, transport, and pipe the natural gas, because obviously Gazprom has a strong hold on that. Sure. And he essentially found that there was a loophole because it didn't account for the petrochemicals, which when you liquefy the natural gas, it's one of the cleaner like fuels. As you know, I think in DC all of the buses run on liquid natural gas.
Great.
Yeah, it's a lot more efficient. It does take a little bit more energy to liquefy. Yeah, but he essentially had talks at that time with the Bush administration to. For United States to become the main importer of like that natural gas, and it was actually their talk was like by 2030 all the cars in America would be at least running on part on liquid natural gas. Huh. And so when Gazprom no, because Gazprom saw that, they were like, who is this guy that owns essentially the largest like privately owned like natural gas field in the world, and he's not even a member of like the party. And they went after him, and thank God that my dad is also a man of principles, so he could have taken an easy route and just been like, oh sure, here, let me align with the government, like join the party, do the whole like hip hip hurrah for everybody, but
it's a blessing to work for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like give them the gift. But he's a very principled in that sense, and he was just like, no, like
that's clear. That much is clear. Does he come to visit you here often?
Yeah, he actually came for the first time in 4 years this past November, and then he came again in December, which was amazing because I haven't left the country in 5 years because of visa status, and I just didn't want to risk it. I got my O1 visa right when Russia decided to invade Crimea. And I was like, well, I don't want to go back and risk somebody being like, oh, well, we're not letting you in. And,
maybe not,
yeah. And I was just like, I have my my dog here, my wife here. Like, I'm not like risking any of that and like not being able to come back. Yeah, particularly the dog.
You said your dog came before.
Well, because he's a child. He's a child. She might be able to manage a couple of months without me. I don't know if he can.
Yeah, I think
she's probably like, vacation.
I'm sure she'd be fun. Yeah. How are you different from your father?
Actually, I would say the primary thing that I think is different is because of how we grew up. Like, he's always been used to, seizing what is his right away, whereas I'm much more diplomatic. And I think that kind of comes, generationally. I don't think, we can possess that same like hunger or that same like
that's boomer nonsense.
Exactly. To me it's for me is like my main impact is I want to change the world, and he has that too. He's a very much the kind of person who is like this is what he used to tell me and my sister, which I love. He still does. He said, kids, when I'm dead and I'm being judged by God, won't be judged by what I did on this earth. It will only be if are your kids better than you? And I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. That's not a lot of pressure at all. but to me that is
he sounds Jewish. Which I do mean as a compliment.
Of course.
This instance.
Of course. Oh, I don't think you can call somebody Jewish and not make it a compliment. Let's be honest.
It's happened, my friend.
I hear the news sometimes.
Every now and then there are people who don't like us. how are you? You mentioned you have a twin sister.
Yeah.
What is she here in the States?
Yeah, she just moved to New York. She lives in Brooklyn. Just literally a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm very happy. She works for a consulting company. She is probably one of the kindest people I know. She's the kind of person who hates receiving gifts, but like giving them to everybody, and we think she likes everything special. She is very hardworking. The only, and she gets very upset about, what is going on in the world, like, and I mean it
understandably.
Yeah, like for her,
Me
like,
too.
we were talking about populism earlier, but God, yeah. I don't know where we're headed. It's scary, but no, she's honestly, I think, one of like the angels on this earth. So when you go back to New York, Dave, when you go visit New York, you guys should definitely meet her.
I'd love to.
She's an amazing person.
I have so we're gonna we got about 10-15 more minutes. I have some more questions. So some random questions.
Perfect.
To finish up. One thing. So you and I have both been to Nexus a lot, and both been willing to like get interviewed about our situation. I think though a lot of people in similar situations are very wary about that sort of thing. I remember the first time I went to like a next gen donor event. It was for the Jews only thing. It's called the Grand Street Summit.
Yep.
And I went there, and I remember someone asked me, "Dave, are you out at work?" And I was like, "I'm a heterosexual. What are you talking about?" And he's like, "No, I mean, do they?" Because I was working in a fundraising department in a nonprofit. And they're like, "Do they know that you have capacity to also make gifts?" And I remember it never really that hadn't even occurred to me at that point. At that particular job, no, I wasn't out. Because I was like low on the totem pole there, and I was just trying.
You don't want to appear like
I was
you're
trying to do my job and stuff. But actually, like it was funny. After that, I became starting with my most immediate job. After that, I've been pretty open about it. I noticed you are. I mean, you're willing to let Vanity Fair interview you, and even a bigger risk, you're willing to let Dave Moss interview you. With microphones running and everything. What's different about you that makes you willing to talk?
Well, it kind of goes back to my criticism of Russia and what is going on. And that's part of the fact that people are too afraid to be out in the open. They're afraid to openly support opposition because they're afraid of whatever like attack might be. They are afraid to.
So that's.
But even like they're afraid to even like give to charities because they don't want to appear like, oh, like look, I'm giving. So it's like it puts them into like that certain category. They like to do everything kind of underground, covered up. And to me, that was always kind of the big stopgap to people being more open and trying to change the country, right? Like you kind of have to lead by example in a way, and it might not be a big example, but even being open about it and just, like I said, speaking, doing it, not like hiding it, because yeah, it's also great when you're, to quote Larry David, anonymous. It's great, but the thing is, people also need to, I think, kind of see who's out there and not just think, oh, it's just these people who are either unknowns in the crowd or doing that because that's their life work or whatever, but just like anybody, people from my socioeconomic class in Russia, like who are, yes, their fathers or mothers are bigwigs, but they're not afraid to express themselves. I mean, that's huge.
This is very powerful.
If everybody did that, you wouldn't have the problems that we're having now.
Mm-hmm. Because I think so. Yeah, I firmly agree with that. One of my favorite Latin expressions that I can't remember.
In Latin.
It's like cum loquor something, but it's to listen, to learn, to speak. And essentially, like if you don't do all three, you're incomplete.
Absolutely.
You have to say what's on your mind, and this is something we have here in America. I think this is certainly a sensitive topic, but like there was this will air in a little while, but it's actually kind of an evergreen topic. There was a shooting this week right? And generally, every time there's a shooting, there is this rush to say, like, you can't politicize this. Or like, no, this is a political. Like, well, how could I possibly advance this issue if I'm not allowed to talk about it? Right? Yes, this was horrible. What's happened? I don't think anybody deserves to be shot. But at the same time, like, that guy advocated for laws that made it possible for him to get shot.
Yeah.
How do you expect me to not bring that up? And we have lots of people who are talking about unity, and I don't necessarily want to be unified with some of these people. I think they're evil. There is this sort of sense that I get it from my own mother. I think she would very much like for me to shut up and go get a job at a nice quiet place.
Nice law firm.
They are professors, and I think I'm very similar to them, and I think it would have made a lot of sense for me to become a professor.
I can totally see you as in the English literature.
Or a rabbi, or whatever. If it weren't for having to learn Hebrew.
I can just picture you with a plaid jacket and just like.
I have several.
Looking as you speak, like looking over at the pretty sophomore in the second row.
And a decent amount of beard stroking, which I still get to do. You don't have to be a professor for that.
My dad is a big beard stroker too. It's all right.
How else are you supposed to have thoughts?
Right?
I don't know. I mean, I assume Alex is doing no thinking at all. He said that was unfair. He's not allowed to speak, so
can't defend himself.
What did your parents want you to do if they could have picked a job for you?
It's hard to say because my dad has always been saying, it doesn't matter what you do, but as long as you're happy doing it and you're doing it to the best that you can be at it, that's what matters. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think just like any parent, he wants stability, so the banker, lawyer, those types of jobs, which always have the resources and kind of the foundation of stability around them. But at the same time, he's been supportive in everything I've done. And
what is it that you're doing now?
So I actually run a company, a startup, that specifically deals with crime reporting. Essentially, I founded it after one of my friends got robbed on a college campus. And it turned out that she was one of 6 people who were robbed. It was right outside of University of South Carolina campus. And even though it was all reported to police, nobody received notifications, nobody found out anything, and so more people fell victim to it. And to me, that kind of raised this whole thing. I couldn't understand how in today's world where everything is automated, how we can't communicate directly to each other and with the police on these issues. And so I started the company, Soder, which essentially provides a platform for co-sourced crime reporting. We're planning to launch our pilot in August, inshallah. But
you're launching in August?
Yeah.
Oh.
Our pilot platform, thank you. But it's part of it is obviously the It's On Us campaign.
Yes, I'm familiar.
So one of the things that I also hope people will use it is having that crowd mentality for protection. Like imagine if you're seeing a guy leading a girl who might be slightly inebriated away from the bar, and you don't know what the intentions are. But if you say snap picture and even like 10 people in the bar see it, and all of a sudden maybe one of them is a friend, maybe one of them is just somebody who walks up and says, do you know her? Are you taking her home? Is she safe? That is enough to just prevent at least a portion of these crimes that happen.
You can and do prevent sexual assaults that way.
Exactly. So it's a big part of trying to like introduce preventative measures. It's also to help expedite communication with between authorities and people who are reporting, because right now if you call 911, even if you're trying to report, I don't know, drunk driving, they're going to ask you for your name, where you are, can you meet with an officer to talk about it. By this time the guy is like fleeing and you're like, well, what the hell was the purpose of this?
Yeah, I haven't enjoyed most of my calls.
No, it's so hard and it doesn't make any sense, right?
I got assaulted in DC 14th and U a few years ago, punched right in the face. They arrested the guy. They let him go the next day. Obviously he never showed up to his court date or whatever. And after that, I remember them being, I was like, what are you going to do about it? I mean, you know where he lives. You're going to go and arrest him? They were, no, we're not going to do that. They know this is a known violent criminal. They know where he lives. And they're not going to, I don't know.
It makes no sense.
No, but I think it's what we did on us. We chose college campuses for a very specific reason. These are little microcosms, and it's much easier to change the culture there. And like, so once you get the seniors on board, basically, or the cool kids, and then it just trickled down, right?
Yeah.
The opposite too. That's how rape culture started.
Yeah.
At some point,
somebody thought it was okay. Yeah.
And then the freshmen look up to those seniors more than anybody else. You get those seniors to say the opposite, and then you
of course, especially in organizations when you normalize that it's.
And now those kids, some of those It's On Us freshmen are now out in the world, and they know what consent is.
Exactly, and they educate other people, and they will be the ones who stand up in the bar and say,
"Yep,
were you like, are you gonna take her home safely, or do you have something else?"
It's not difficult to make that sort of thing seem cool.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, it was a pretty impressive accomplishment for them to make rape seem cool, because it's like it's actually the least cool thing in the world. But, kids are very impressionable. I was once very impressionable as well.
There's also this macho bravado type thing.
Yes.
Where it's like,
yep.
Oh, look, well, I slept with her. Doesn't matter that, like, how I did it, but scored for me. And you're just like,
yeah.
It's disgusting, but.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that was one of the privileges of my life to be able to work on that. We've got just a few more minutes. I want to ask one more question. And then for fairness, I'll read the thing they wrote about me in the Chronicle. So what is the biggest problem that you think philanthropists can realistically solve in our lifetime? Take your time.
One... Honestly, I would say actually probably human rights.
Really?
And I do honestly believe, I think...
Basic human dignity for everyone? You think we can do that?
I'm not saying basic human dignity because that's a much larger, that's kind of reaching into eliminating poverty and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think human rights afforded to all is something that can be achieved.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that, and that the part of the world that is pushing back against is the same ones that are pushing against, the Western globalization, where it might be like traditions that are not necessarily like, like the... genital mutilation in some tribes and stuff, and they're like, well, it's our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the Western culture that comes with the globalization is essentially, let's make sure everybody's afforded same rights, and that's why I don't think it's a Western civilization. I think it's just Earth civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it is happening. I think right now we're in this huge pendulum upswing where we've swung very far to, again, being like, oh, globalization doesn't work, EU sucks, NAFTA sucks, everything sucks. And maybe that's what needed to essentially collapse it and swing right back to where we're like, okay, well, we tried your way. Let's try a complete...
Try your crap solutions again.
So, and I do think, you can actually see viable results because, especially among young people, everybody who's coming out in Russia, in Europe, in Philippines, all those people, they're like, well, I don't care if you're gay, if you're a woman, whatever it is, like, sometimes it's kind of like that simplistic of like live and let live. But for so many of those countries, like I remember how, homosexuality was viewed in like the 2000s in Russia among like young people. That's a huge progress when you're like, well, why should we bother them if they don't bother us? Mm-hmm. They might not necessarily like have the same views as, the people marching for equality here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's still huge progress.
We were pretty bad on that.
Oh, yeah,
I grew up in Maine, where it was a very homophobic place.
Yeah.
Really, and that's changed. It was the first state to legalize marriage.
Yeah.
It's some pretty solid stuff. So I know you got to go to your next meeting. I'm going to read my
yes, please.
What they wrote about me. I'm going to ask you to. There's one thing in particular I want you to comment on. So this was a few years ago. Dave Moss is only 33 years old, but he's already helped donate about $5 million. The fourth generation philanthropist family. I don't know where she got that from.
You're like, it's fifth, by the way.
I think everybody. I don't. Who knows? I don't know 5 generations ago. He might have been. Anyway, the fourth generation philanthropist family has given major gifts to institutions like Brandeis University, Colby College, and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Growing up, he helped his grandmother with her giving, and he has since been involved in grant making and fundraising at nonprofits like the Slingshot Fund, the National Youth Rights Association, and the It's On Us campaign. Last year, Mr. Moss created the Unfunded List, which critiques startup nonprofits' rejected grant proposals, distributes a list of the most promising organizations, and suggests alternative sources of funding. My Rolodex has significantly more currency in it than my bank account, Mr. Moss says. That's the only time anyone's ever called me Mr. Moss. In most settings, Mr. Moss's story would be exceptional. Right? I think it's exceptional in all settings, but at a recent Washington gathering of the scions of some of the world's wealthiest and most influential families, he was just another face in the crowd. But I'm really happy that the one quote she used was, my Rolodex has significantly more currency in my bank account. This is true for everybody. Gates can call Slim and Buffett, and those guys have a lot more money, right? And there's a lot of other people you can call. So how do you work with other folks of similar opinions and similar views?
Well, Mr. Moss.
You go to Nexus, I guess, right?
Yeah, Nexus is a big one. I try to stay involved in Boston affairs, like obviously the Next Gen crowd, the Social Innovation Forum. I do try to, there's a TUG, Tech Underwriting Greater Good, which is a Boston-based philanthropy that essentially enlists VCs and tech companies around the area to, go to events, meet people, and just give back to the community.
Excellent.
Also, a big part of is, it's a little things where you just volunteer like a little bit of your time, like the big brother, big sister. I'm a huge believer.
Are you a big brother?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm a huge believer in
That's awesome.
education and affording every kid. Like, to me, if you know how I am on federal spending, but if I could just gut the budget and take everything from unnecessary programs and just dump it all into education to make sure that every child has the same opportunity until no matter what.
That's your folks say.
I would. I believe your folks say that too.
Some of them. It's a more of a man.
Yeah. But it's or even going to the Red Cross every 6 weeks and giving blood or platelets if I have time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You.
So it's just it's a little stuff that it's on my way back from work. I just stop by the center, sit there for a little bit, but it saves lives. Like, they constantly are having a shortage, and to me, it's like, first of all, it makes me feel American because I'm like, there's at least a full body of me flowing through somebody's veins right now. And the second, it's like, I know, they should just give citizenship space out on that.
Yeah, I mean, you seem American enough to me. If I were handing out citizenships, you would get one.
But yeah, so it's little stuff like that, and then obviously just being surrounded by people who are like-minded.
Yep.
Like I said, that's part of the reason why I love coming to Nexus. It's not just to, hear people speak or, give updates on what they're doing. It's to meet like-minded individuals and collaborate, yeah.
Will I see you there next month?
Of course.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting us to your
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
And I look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good afternoon.
My man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Open Door Philanthropy featuring Victor Bogachev. And as always, if you're looking for or willing to provide helpful and candid feedback on unfunded grant proposals, please sign up at unfundedlist.com.